Doctor Strange is kind of a neat character, but is far from my favorite. I don't know. I've never been huge into the magic genre. I recall seeing this film opening night. In fact, I have seen this film 4 times to date, and honestly, each time feels like the first. Besides some cool moments and cool effects, it always feels like the first time I've watched it, and I don't know, it's just not that memorable. Did I remember Doctor Strange's girlfriend? No. Did I remember the end credits scene set up? Nope. To be fair, the end credits scene never went anywhere. I do like this film enough, though. I liked it the first time, but for some reason, this may be one of the least memorable films in all of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Am I the only one who thinks this? Just a quiz before we start. What's any character in this film named, bar the two that kept appearing, Doctor Strange and Wong? I also think Marvel saw that the only thing that truly worked here was Doctor Strange and Wong, which is why they're still players, and pretty much anything else is not. I don't want to sound too harsh, though. This really is a fine enough movie, but yeah. This is Marvel in the motions, and despite the new subgenre, it's just another Marvel movie that sets up other Marvel movies, which starts to become a problem at this point in Phase 3. Doctor Strange had a film in 1978, kind of. It was a TV film, but Doctor Strange was a character who, like a lot of heroes we have covered in the Marvel Cinematic Universe videos, would have a proper theatrical film attempts through the years. Roger Corman's New World Pictures attempted to make a proper film in 1986, but never made it past the scripting phase. Regency Films tried making something a few years later in 1989, which would see Strange face off against Dormammu as he did in this final film, but again, it never made it super far before dying off, since Marvel and Warner Bros., who would have distributed the film, were not on great terms due to separate marketing disputes. Charles Band of Full Moon Entertainment wanted to get the rights to Doctor Strange and had it briefly following this, but by the time the script was written, the rights had lapsed and went back to Marvel. Full Moon still made the movie regardless, creating Dr. Mordred in place of Doctor Strange and pretty much doing the script anyways. I saw the film, and yeah, it's a really cheap early 1990s attempt at making a film out of Doctor Strange, just stripping the explicit mentions of the Marvel Comics characters. 1992 saw a Nightmare on Elm Street creator Wes Craven sign on for an ill-fated attempt to make a Doctor Strange film under Savoy Pictures. Then David S. Goyer, writer of many superhero films, created a script that was never realized. In 1997, Sony got the rights before attempting to make Spider-Man, the other famous Steve Ditko creation, and the film also fell through. Michael France, the writer of the early 2000s Punisher and Hulk films, wrote a treatment with Chuck Russell, director of The Scorpion King, attached to direct. But when those rights lapsed, it went on to Dimension Films, who picked up the rights in 2001 and went back to Goyer's script from 1997, and Dimension offering him a chance to direct the film. Goyer was waiting till he finished the film adaptation of Neil Gaiman's Murder Mysteries, but by the time that project was canceled, Dimension had sold the rights to Miramax, with David Goyer left out on that project. That would sit in production for 3 years till rights lapsed and were immediately picked up by Paramount Pictures in 2005. This was around the time of the first grumblings of it tying into the MCU, since this was the time they started considering doing independent Marvel movies again with help of Paramount. Guillermo del Toro was set to direct and Neil Gaiman was set to write, but if you hear Guillermo del Toro mentioned in one of these videos, you probably also know what that means. The project sat in development hell for ages, then died off. Okay, so after sitting on the shelf for a bit, 2009 came along, Iron Man was out, and the team started flirting with the idea of bringing in some lesser-known properties, like Iron Man at the time, to their new universe, with them lacking many of the A-listers of the early 2000s. These are the same meetings that would eventually also see the rise of films like Ant-Man and Guardians of the Galaxy. Ant-Man also notably teetering around in development hell for quite a while. If you watch my Ant-Man video, you'd see that. By 2013, Kevin Feige said that Doctor Strange was a priority and set it to be introduced in Phase 3 at some point. Soon the film was in development, with Mark Andrews, a relatively unproven director, competing with Jonathan Levine, a comedy director, and horror director Scott Derrickson to direct Doctor Strange, though soon Derrickson won out, and for the first time in a long time, Doctor Strange had some real legs following decades of the property being passed studio to studio and hand to hand, begging to be made. Ultimately, what got him the film was an animatic he commissions that saw Doctor Strange leave his body and fight in the astral plane while someone operated on him, based on a moment from the Doctor Strange The Oath comic arc. This abnormal tactic of putting together a massive pitch with a demo sequence impressed Marvel and got Derrickson the job. Derrickson would work with his collaborator C. Robert Cargill on the film, with future Dune writer John Splathitz also jumping in to create the project, being a big fan of Doctor Strange as a child and the group writing together the script. Nightmare was initially considered to be the villain, but soon they wound up on Dormammu since they thought it would be slightly easier to explain with a story that already set aside time for Strange's origin story. Legend has it Benedict Cumberbatch was eyed to be the lead of the film basically from day one, but Tom Hardy and Jared Leto were considered as backups. Both would settle for Sony Marvel Films to lead later on. I can see kind of why they considered Leto, despite him being, not very good at acting these days, but Tom Hardy baffles me. I absolutely love Tom Hardy, don't get me wrong, but that would have been a horrendous choice for Doctor Strange. He's just not like that at all. Cumberbatch wanted to do it and was ready to sign on, but based on his schedule, he wasn't able to take the role. Joaquin Phoenix, who went on to play Joker later on, would be considered instead. Phoenix would eventually pull out, and after one last push to find an actor, they finally got Cumberbatch to play the role, sliding production a bit to bring him on, so I suppose it all worked out in the long run since he continues to play the character to this day. From there, development went pretty smoothly, the film hitting pretty close to its original target, coming in on October 13th of 2016. Alright, so Doctor Strange follows, Dr. Stephen Strange. Anyhow, a cult of crazy sorcerer zealots led by Caecilius steal a forbidden spell from the book of Vagilustro. I can't say any of these names. The Sorcerer Supreme, known as the Ancient One, tries stopping him and his crew, but they fail, escaping with the spell. Meanwhile, back in New York, Dr. Stephen Strange is one of the city's top surgeons, saving people to make money for his fancy apartment and cars, picking patients based on his ego, denying some of their situation seems too hopeless to operate on, and others for being too easy and not impressive to him. Not to mention his ex Christine has also sensed this change in him and cares for him despite him being an asshole, and all in all living this out-of-touch, ego-fueled lifestyle. That all changes one day when Strange gets in a car accident. He survives the crash, but his hands are utterly destroyed, which obviously doesn't bode too well for his job as a surgeon, since that's pretty precision-based. He tries every technique to fix his problem, but he can't get his hands to a level where he can perform his old job and get his life back. When working with a physical therapist, Strange hears of another patient, Jonathan Pangborn, who was once paralyzed from an irreversible spinal injury, but who miraculously found a cure to everything. Strange goes out and finds John, who tells him he went to Kamarta, and Strange heads out there to get the mystery cure that John used. He manages to find the people that he was told of, but the main woman is the Ancient One, who seems to live a very strange spiritual life, and Strange assumes it's all bullshit mysticism. That is until the Ancient One brings him into the astral plane and proves to him that it is indeed true magic. Strange decides he wants to learn and starts doing just that. He starts his training, which acts as something of an ego death for Stephen. Strange is using his academic skills to read through the many books in the Sorcerer's Library and becoming semi-proficient pretty quickly, even learning to harness the Eye of Agamotto, which allows him to rewind objects in time, though Mordo warns him this could potentially lead to rifts in time and paradoxes. Caecilius and his boys summon Dormammu, hoping to live eternally in the dark dimension by any means necessary. However, the many sorcerers' sanctums spread around the world act as basically anchors to keep out dark powers like Dormammu, so Caecilius starts traveling around to destroy them, coming to blows with Doctor Strange. The spar ends, but during the battle, Caecilius reveals he's only trying to emulate the Ancient One who drew on Dormammu's power to live her life eternally the way that she has. Anyhow, not long after that, the Ancient One is killed by Dormammu, here using her last moments in the spirit realm to tell Strange that he's going to break some rules too, and it's more or less chill as long as you're a good person or something, I guess. Okay, so the whole thing kind of climaxes at the Hong Kong Sanctum. Wong is dead and Strange is fighting off the evil wizards until he starts using the magic eye of Agamotto to save Wong. Strange gets a plan and travels to the Dark Dimension using the eye to basically lock himself and Dormammu in a time loop. No matter how many times Dormammu killed Strange, without him bringing an end to the time loop, they're both stuck. So Dormammu agreed he'd keep it pushing and leave Earth alone as long as Strange lets him out of this loop. Mordo has followed the rules so strictly for a long time, and Doctor Strange and the Ancient One just doing whatever they want makes him look like an idiot, so he leaves Kamar-Taj. This film adopts a lot of characters since virtually everything and everyone is adapted from the comics, and being that this is a brand new franchise to the universe, bar the few cameos from other characters like Thor, everyone's brand new, so let's get into it. Doctor Strange first appeared in Strange Tales 110 and was one of the few major heroes created by Steve Ditko, the Spider-Man guy, with Stan Lee. Like the comics, he is an arrogant man who becomes a humble sorcerer, though in the comics he makes his way up the totem pole until he becomes Sorcerer Supreme, a title he's yet to hold in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. We can talk more about him and his motivations in the film later, but he is by and large faithful to the comics, and Benedict Cumberbatch fits the role aesthetically very well. Dormammu is basically Doctor Strange's main villain, first appearing in Strange Tales 126. In the comics, Dormammu is a flame-headed evil god of the Dark Dimension who has ungodly powers. He is a fault line, born basically of pure evil magic. Here he is pretty much the same, though the design had a major overhaul. The whole end game for him is to slowly take over the multiverse and absorb the energy into the Dark Universe, and that's the same both here in the comics. Karl Mordo first appeared in Strange Tales 111 and has consistently been the anti-Doctor Strange, the Ancient One taking him on, sensing his evil energy and trying to hold him back and setting him in line. He is more or less a clone antagonist and actually largely set the summoning of Dormammu into motion in the comics. Here he's kind of a straight-edge wizard who sees Strange as a wild card and finds out the Ancient One may have pulled some Dark Dimension BS to get the power of immortality, leading him to try to take out numerous sorcerers by the film's end, though of course Marvel had other plans, and we'll come to that sooner or later. Christine Palmer was an entirely random grab for this film, and as a result I don't really think she worked. She first appeared in Night Nurse 1, later working with Nightcrawler quite a bit in the comics. She unironically never interacted with Doctor Strange a single time in the comics as far as I can find. The Night Nurse had a brief affair with Doctor Strange following the film's release, but Christine Palmer herself, who is not the Night Nurse, never met him. Totally random grab. Why she was picked, I don't know. I guess she's another medical field character, so they just thought, what the hell, and threw her in there. I don't know. Wong has been a long-term side character for Doctor Strange, first appearing alongside him in Strange Tales 110 and becoming one of Strange's disciples upon his ascension to Sorcerer Supreme. In the film, he kind of held on to something of a comic relief role, and Wong has grown to become a fan favorite in the films, but functionally he's pretty similar. Caecilius is in a way this film's main villain, or at least the villain we see the most. First appearing in Strange Tales 130 in the comics, he's more or less Mordo's henchman, working directly for him in the comics. In the film, he takes on the main villain role and in many ways takes on Mordo's comic book personality, having started as a disciple of the Ancient One before defecting to free Dormammu. Basically, Mordo's story was split in half and divided between this character who was originally his henchman and Mordo proper. The character himself being somewhat rare. As for comic appearances, he's not all that important. The Ancient One in the comics is known as Yao, and both this and the comic version were Sorcerer Supreme, and both introduced Strange to the world of magic. First appearing in Strange Tales 110 in the comic, the Ancient One was an elderly Tibetan man, but here he is played by English actress Tilda Swinton, who is an absolute master of her craft in acting, but there was some controversy for whitewashing the character. C. Robert Cargill gave the justification that the ancient Tibetan warlock character was something of a racist caricature. Kevin Feige had similar thoughts, but by the time of Shang-Chi had said he regretted not bringing in an Asian actor and trying something else to separate from its semi-racist origins. I will say, playing devil's advocate, you have a moment in this film where Strange sees an older Asian man, Hamir, and assumes it was the Ancient One before meeting the true Ancient One and realizing perceptions can be deceiving.
Thank you, Ancient One, for seeing me.
You're very welcome.
We also had Mordo, who was race swapped from the source material, and no one really cared. I am personally of the opinion that if you have an angle that is intriguing, I don't think the race of the character matters that much, and this wasn't some white guy, it was a middle-aged female, proving looks can be deceiving, which is sort of the point. It's supposed to fight the archetype, but I can also sympathize with people who are offended, but I still think they did something neat with her, and I don't know, I'm not that bothered, sue me for it. Nicodemus West, or Dr. West, is a rival to Strange in this film, and in the comics he was a sub-villain in Doctor Strange the Oath, first appearing in that mini-series' first issue. He was nothing major here, but the Oath was a major influence on this film conceptually, along with the Ditko stuff, so I think he was pulled over as a nod to Brian Vaughn's story that he made through the Oath. Hamir was one of the Ancient One's assistants, basically the father of Strange's disciple, Wong. He first appeared in Strange Tales 111 and is pretty much here to just add a little gag about Doctor Strange thinking he was the Ancient One, as we discussed a second ago. Tina Minoru appears super briefly as the protector of the Hong Kong Sanctum. In the comics, she was a dark wizard and villain to the Runaways, part of their rival group, the Pride, first appearing in Runaways 1 from 2003. There's a more comic-accurate version of the character in the Runaways TV show, which for a while was also canon, but that has since been decanonized along with much of the Marvel television characters from the MCU's earlier days, but this character is just a minor background character. I don't really know why they took the name from the Runaways character, which is pretty much entirely unrelated, but whatever. Daniel Drum in the comics is the younger brother of Brother Voodoo, also named Brother Voodoo. He just isn't the main Brother Voodoo. Did that make sense? Not really. He haunts his older brother Jericho, whose power is talking to the dead. In this film, he's just another wizard. In the comics, he's only tangentially related to Doctor Strange, dying in his first appearance of Strange Tales 169 and hanging around as a ghost here and there. Lucian Astor is one of the main zealots along with Case Elias. In the comics, he is a sleaze selling access to easy magic in The Incredible Hulk Annual 18 from 1992. He's only appeared a few times ever. Not sure why they even bothered pulling him into this film, but they've pulled a lot of random people. Well, that was all the characters, the bigger and more obscure. It's interesting Marvel kind of just picked random magic-based characters or characters that loosely fit the archetype they were looking for and didn't just bother creating new characters. It always feels so strange to me, but that's what they did. Doctor Strange, or Stephen Strange, was a surgeon who was on top of his game and as a result became a giant prick. He pushes away his friends like Christine, an ex-girlfriend who loved him and still cares for him. He thinks he can do no wrong, and as a result grew a massive ego. It is in many ways a remix of Tony Stark's arc from the original Iron Man film in a regard. Following a car accident which sees him unable to use his hands, he goes to Kamar-Taj to learn the ways of healing his wounded hands and learns of the magical arts. Upon learning of the world of magic, he is hesitant to believe for about 3 seconds and then tries to study the arts, moving on from the basic techniques into near mastery incredibly fast, becoming almost an entirely different character and going through an instant ego death that would place him into being the Doctor Strange we see in his other appearances following this. I will say if I had a major problem with the arc, it is that it is way too fast. I wish there was more of a skeptic before he finally believes. I always point in my Star Wars reviews to Han Solo basically calling the Force a load of bullshit and jumping through hoops to disprove what he's obviously witnessing in front of his eyes. I wish we got more of that with Doctor Strange, since that kind of is where the setup was going for a minute. Much of Doctor Strange's arc happens in an ultra-abridged form in basically 15 minutes of the second act. Also, in a macro sense, we never see any regression or leaning back into the douchey skeptic we have at the start of the movie. We get minor jokes in Spider-Man No Way Home that merely hint of his arrogance, but by and large he has an instant ego death and instantly becomes a whole new man. I don't know if I totally love the speed at which they hobble through this arc, but in theory it's a good arc that makes sense, and I like it on paper. Like if we just look at it from like a one-sentence summary and not actually consider how they executed it. Christine Palmer is the love interest, more or less. She is an ex-girlfriend that once dated Doctor Strange before some time previously breaking up with him. Strange doesn't treat her very well at the start. He is arrogant and acts like the rest of the medical staff is below him, Christine included. Granted, she's treated slightly better than the others, but as she tries helping him through his life-changing injury, he blows her off. This really goes nowhere though, since Doctor Strange learns magic and it leads him to simply figuring it out all by himself. So her concern that he would not be able to accept his injury was completely mute. He was not right at all to feel resigned in his injury, and she wasn't right to try to tell him to move on. Not moving on made him a badass magic superhero with cured hands. No, but at one point she operates on him while he's fighting Dormammu cultists in the astral realm, the sequence I mentioned at the start of this video, which was kind of fun since it integrated her into the action. But with that said, she's kind of forgettable. Each time I watch this film, I say, oh yeah, the Notebook lady's in this too. I like how Christine accuses him of being a cultist liar, like she didn't see him as a ghost like 5 seconds earlier.
So you joined a cult?
No, I didn't. No, not exactly. No, I mean, they did teach me to tap into powers that I never even knew existed.
Yeah, that sounds like a cult.
You're not getting it. It's not clocking to you.
Honestly, Christine was more skeptical than Doctor Strange, which is wild to me. The Ancient One is the Sorcerer Supreme, which I guess is like the Pope of the magic realm or whatever. Anyhow, she is fighting Caecilius and his gang for much of the film and brings Doctor Strange into the magic world. The big tension point with her is her immortality and how she uses the dark dimension to kind of facilitate her eternal life, which is sort of hypocritical, since that is what Caecilius is trying to do, and yet she condemns him for it while just doing it herself. This doesn't entirely get a satisfying conclusion. In the film, she dies and kind of embraces that death comes to us all and nothing lasts forever, that sort of jive, which is cool and works on the immortal angle, but we never get a real satisfying reason she was using the dark dimension, and we never really learn how she does it either. She hand waves it like, well, I need to protect Earth.
As you well know, sometimes one must break the rules in order to serve the greater good.
But like, how and why is she using it isn't said, and I think it should have been, since it's like the whole villain plot of the movie is trying to do this same thing. How come Dormammu isn't coming to Earth since she's doing it? Why can't Caecilius just do it the same way as the Ancient One? I'm confused. Carl Mordu is a straight-laced magic man. He does it by the book, so it pisses him off that Strange just does whatever the hell he wants and everyone praises him for it. He lingers around fight scene to fight scene, but when he learns the Ancient One is using the dark dimension and refuses to explain it, like me, he ends up confused and pissed off.
It's over.
You still think there will be no consequences, Strange? No price to pay. We broke our rules just like her.
He decides some of these characters don't deserve the powers they have, and as a result, he basically decides to go all Benedict Arnold and plans a counter-revolution to kill all the unworthy sorcerers or strip them of their powers. We don't really know since this plotline was totally abandoned after this film. Multiverse of Madness has him show up as a variant version or alternate universe version. Not sure if I've explained that in any of these videos yet. I'm sure most of you guys already know what a variant is, but regardless, they hand wave it and that arc plays out off screen. But it supposedly happens. They mention it. Wong is the other side character. He is the serious, grumpy, but goofy sorcerer who helps Doctor Strange do battle and acts kind of as a straight man that ends up in goofy scenarios. He dies for 3 seconds, but Doctor Strange breaks the rules using the Eye of Agamotto to bring him back to life. Caecilius is the main villain, kind of, sorta, and he's trying to bring down the sanctuaries to steal spells that will allow him to summon Dormammu to become his immortal servant once the dark dimension merges with Earth. He's kind of fight scene fodder, nothing too interesting with him really, since he's totally functional to add action and create a race against time to stop Dormammu. Admittedly, he's one of the worst villains in the MCU, which is sad because Mads Mikkelsen, who plays the character, is a tremendous actor. I love Mads Mikkelsen. This feels like a waste. Dormammu is last. He is an evil super being in the dark dimension who brings planets into the dark realm so he can grow in power and rule over them. He isn't in much of the film, but Doctor Strange coming up with his time loop solution to basically cause a stalemate and inconvenience Dormammu so much that he just leaves because taking Earth would be too much of a waste of time for him is kind of fun and goofy.
Dormammu! Dormammu! Dormammu!
I think like the Mandarin in Iron Man 3, it shows the MCU was willing to play it fast and loose with some of their villains and just do weird stuff, which is fantastic in my book. I also liked the Mandarin. Sue me for it. I love saying sue me for it. That's my new thing. It's going to be in all these videos now. Tonally, Doctor Strange is kind of on brand for your average Marvel Cinematic Universe romp. There started to kind of be this default tone that I think was more or less modeled loosely off of Jon Favreau's Iron Man films and would occasionally be shifted with certain films like Winter Soldier or Thunderbolts way down the line, and that is a semi-serious action film with goofy moments to cut the tension. It was the tried and true Marvel feel when filmmakers didn't have something really different in mind, and we started to see this especially in Phase 3 when it came to the more run-of-the-mill stuff they couldn't take as many risks with, and yeah, it's just that. Stephen Strange makes quips, shoots his lasers at people, and occasionally light drama happens with a super abridged arc. Michael Giacchino did the music for this film, and it feels very run-of-the-mill. Like, I think I could go to a stock music CD from 25 years ago and find a track called something like Wizard Music, then recreate that song with a budget, and bing bang boom, the score for Doctor Strange is in your hands. It is fitting for the film, but feels very, very derivative and not very good. I don't think it is something horrendously distracting, like it's not a huge piece of garbage, but if even the most a stout film score fan could hum the thing by the end of this 2-hour movie, I think they deserve a prize. Much like the film itself, it is totally forgettable. Wyatt Smith and Sabrina Plisco edited this movie. They have done several Hollywood films, but nothing super major. Their most recent credit being that live-action How to Train Your Dragon film from a few months back. It is really well done. The CGI and visual effects are stunning and frankly carry this movie above the other semi-generic Marvel Studios films. The twisting cities, playing with perspective, and general reality of Strange's chunk of the MCU is absolutely stunning. The film is also a brisk film, clocking in at under 2 hours. I don't know if this is on editing and script, but I would perhaps have liked to see more exposition of Strange's origin, perhaps at the expense of some of the action scenes that felt a little prolonged and unnecessary. I just feel at times an origin, villain plot, and power discovery plot is a lot to cram into such a relatively short film, and it could have been a writing issue or perhaps an editing issue, but you feel like this film ramps up from the first act to the third act at lightning pace, and you kind of miss that part where Doctor Strange is exploring this new world he's in favor of just going from origin and hard cut into the final conflict. Cinematography was done by Ben Davis, a big Marvel guy who did several Marvel films, including Guardians of the Galaxy. James Gunn complaining that during Guardians 2, much of his crew was busy on Doctor Strange. The film looks decent enough. It's a little bright, a little digital, but where it shines aesthetically is with the simply incredible CGI and effects shots that line this film end to end. It looks really good in some moments, honestly, but by and large, this is kind of just following the formula, which doesn't exactly make it stand out from the perspective of what was shot in the camera through cinematography. The mid-credits scene was a teaser scene from Thor Ragnarok showing Thor explaining to Strange that he is looking for Odin, and Doctor Strange agreeing to help him so long as they all left New York after, since he's the guardian of magic now and Loki is this magical evil man. The end credit scene sees Mordo take the wizard powers away from Jonathan, that paraplegic guy. He used his powers to walk early on in the film. It teases Mordo as the villain of the sequel, which was originally the case along with Nightmare, but upon rewrites it was just kind of mentioned that he tried killing Strange at some point but failed. An alternate universe version of the character would appear in the sequel, but this was a by and large dead-end tease that would never and will never go anywhere. This film has a new short film included through Team Thor Part 2. It's more of the same from the first Team Thor. It's another one of these. This time we see Thor as a bad roommate. He talks to kids at a school. It's goofy, nothing major, but I found it fun enough, and these are good little teases for Thor, even if they're not the more in-depth one-shots we got at the start of the MCU.
There's nothing too hard, really. The usual stuff. Cleaning my armor. After adventures and battles, there'll be blood. But really, Shane, the main thing you'll be doing as my servant is to get a job and to pay my rent.
We got a standard and Infinity tie-in comic to the film. The standard comic sees the sorcerers before the film proper, fighting to save a relic, the bow and arrow of Apollon. It's okay, but definitely pretty standard for tie-ins. The art is pretty meh since they didn't really pull an A-team to do it. The Infinity comic is slightly more substantial, showing Caecilius' defection, taking some of the other sorcerers with him, showing how his posse came to be for the film proper. Doctor Strange is a decent, if totally forgettable, film largely. The movie's packed with cool images, mostly coming from the VFX department. The cinematography is pretty meh. It really shows the strange stuff CGI can do. Get it? Strange? This movie is a vessel for cool, if somewhat vapid imagery. I talked to a few people about the film and no one remembers it. Aiden watched it just a few months ago for his LEGO Avengers game retrospective, and talking to him, he literally didn't remember most of this shit, and it had been literal like a couple months. I think it has to be the least memorable MCU film up to this point. The part where Strange starts a time loop with Dormammu was kind of fun and was a weird climax. This was memorable.
Dormammu, I've come to bargain.
The Dormammu dimension also really emulates Steve Ditko's art, which was a really fun touch. These films love their Kirby dots and always put that in there as a reference, but not a lot of films do the classic Ditko blob. These are weird. I love these. I don't know why they put these in the movie. Very Ditko. Strange's arc is cool, but feels abridged, and also, the original Iron Man saw a similar, if slightly remixed arc, and it was also done significantly better. This is one of those films you kind of forget while you watched. Remarkable simply for being a Marvel Cinematic Universe movie and being one of the 37 films that have come out over the years. It's a part of that legacy, and in my opinion, not much more. It blends in with the crowd more than a lot of these films do, and it's pretty middle of the road. I've seen this film 4 times, and every time it's like the first because it's just not that memorable. And I'm sure I'll forget about it once again a month after making this video. Doctor Strange did pretty well, costing Marvel in the ballpark of $200 million to make, though estimates vary on that significantly, some as low as 170, some as high as 230, and the film making $677 million off of that, meaning it was definitely pretty healthy at the box office. On Rotten Tomatoes, the film got an 89% at a time that Marvel could do no wrong. The film on Metacritic got a 72 out of 100, and people generally thought this was a pretty good movie, and I think it has some unique for the time stuff, though I think history looks back on this film as just another film in an oversaturated genre.